Hello, Tom. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you very much. And how are you?
Yeah, I'm all right, thank you. We're coming together today to talk about this topic of personal impact. I guess what it means for you or for me.
Mm.
How do you get it, if that is such a thing? And what does it mean for you going forwards? What does it mean about your future development? I get first off, Tom. What does it mean to you?
Well, I guess it means several things, but the biggest thing is how you leave people feeling.
Okay.
That's what it is ultimately. And as a northerner, culturally, which is
Yeah.
important to remember culture,
Mm.
it wasn't a major consideration. The major consideration in northern culture is honesty and directness.
Okie
Um,
dokie.
how you leave people feeling is almost borderline irrelevant. As long as you're not physically attacking or insulting them, then it's just the way you are, and it's not even a consideration. Now,
Hmm.
but culture's very interesting because families have culture as well, and I'm sure inside individuals we have our own culture.
Yeah.
So when you go somewhere else where there's a different culture, those culture clashes,
Mm.
then that's where personal impact really comes in to its own, because that's what you're thinking about, that's what you're doing. Because
Mhm.
if you're having a conversation with a cab driver and he turns around and wants you to throw you out of the cab and you think, what have I done? Then it's your personal impact you need to look at. You've accidentally insulted the cab driver because of your uh, perceived demanding ways. Because the making a poor personal impact or a good personal impact, it's a
Mm.
two-way thing. It's not just what you're giving out, it's what people are perceiving through their
Mm.
culture as well. So when two cultures clash, what happens? um because a London cab driver, I'm
Mhm.
talking about a true experience here a long time ago. A London
Yeah.
cab driver perceives
Mhm.
directness as a demand,
Right.
and that's not appreciated, because I'm not your servant, I'm providing a service. There's a
Mm.
difference.
Okay.
And so managing the impact can make a massive difference. But to a northerner, sometimes it can be that you're not being yourself. And it's very important that you have to be yourself. So you have to somehow manage yourself to be able to manage other people,
Sure.
which happens to be two of the pillars of emotional intelligence:
Mhm.
self-awareness and self-management. Well, it's actually, no, first it's three: self-awareness, self-management, and social management is what we're
Mhm.
talking about. And it's a thing I tell it's my guideline for having kids is
Mhm.
um to help. Well, because they say this could be apocryphal, but they say 75% of the jobs that when our kids were born they could end up doing haven't been
Uh-huh.
invented hadn't been invented
Right.
by the time they were born.
Mhm.
So how do you raise a kid to be able to look after themselves? Well,
Mhm.
so you look at general but very important human attributes. And one
Mm.
of them is being able to manage yourself so you can manage other people. And that's not in the business management sense. It's purely how to deal with people of different types. And the main thing is you got to manage yourself. And ultimately, the thing I think we forget about, and I think in society as a general, specifically British ones,
Mm.
but maybe Western, you can say, is self-awareness.
Yeah.
And the thing about self-awareness is I used to think it was just knowing what you think and why you think it. I mean,
Mhm.
really knowing what you think and really knowing why you think it, not just
Mm.
the socially acceptable version we can put on. Oh, I'm a nice person. That's why I give to the poor. Well, is it? Or you just like looking down on people and giving people money? It makes you feel better, superior.
Yeah, you're of
So,
the no such thing as altruism camp then.
exactly. No, there isn't. There isn't. I think altruism, it all comes back to us and how we make ourselves feel. What
Mhm.
are we doing? Even if it's because I need my peace of mind,
Uh-huh.
that is still ultimately you managing yourself. And so, but like I said, I used to just think it was knowing what you think and why you think it. But I had another definition of self-awareness is knowing how you come across.
Yeah.
And I thought that has been my failure. And that is really managing your personal impact, is knowing how you come across. And are you okay with it? Because sometimes you think, I'm fine being me. I like being free. Being free in my everyday behavior of my life is important. But it's also important not to upset people. My values, not to leave people feeling bad for no reason at all, just because I wasn't considerate enough. So when it comes to being you, you can still be you. You're just more of you. How do you be the complete you and manage the impact you have upon people? Because sometimes I don't care what people think. And it's okay. Because I think personal impact is how you leave people feeling. And everything is context based. You really have to think, what is the context I'm in? What do I have to do to get what I want in this context while still being me? Because I'm a northerner still. I hate phonies. I hate disingenuous people. I go, why don't you just say what you think? Why are you talking around the topic? That is so English. But sometimes you can understand why, because you're managing people's feelings. You don't want to be too direct because you might hurt them. They're kind of talking around it, hoping people get the gist. So I get why people do that, but quite often it's not context based. It's misused. Sometimes you really need a very clear, open response from people.
Sure. And
So
I guess my take on sort of personal impact is the idea that you're always having an impact. And really, if we take away the sort of the judgment value of is it good or is it bad, it's about cause and effect, isn't it?
Yeah.
About thinking what I do and the way that I behave and the way that I interact with others will have some form of impact on them. And that will then change possibly their behavior, but definitely the way that they think about me. And so if we think about, you can have that sort of very fleeting personal impact, and you can also have something that's going to be long lasting. So you're thinking about, we're almost moving from the topic of personal impact to personal branding, when you're thinking about how do I want others to think about me throughout my career? Do I want them to think of me as someone who is a safe pair of hands or someone who's a disruptor?
Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right, actually. Sometimes, though, people are more naturally suited to doing that because it's something that we've done a lot of. Whereas as myself, it's something I've had to learn to do. And then when we're working with people, they're having to learn to do it as well, most of the time. So when you think about it in terms of personal branding and always having an impact, which we are, I tend to see, if we're trying to manage our impact constantly, it's very tiring. Especially to begin with, especially if you're learning this new skill. And what I've found is it's best to be able to turn it on and off.
Okay.
And my kids have noticed this. They say, when something happens and I have to calm things down and be very clear and consider a kind of an emotional person I'm having to deal with, kids will say, Dad, you've got your training voice on. And my wife says it as well. And it's true, because I generally slow things down, give good eye contact, ask more open questions, wait, really good listening, reflecting back, making sure that we understand what we're both talking about, making sure we're on the same common ground, and really focusing on helping the other person. If I feel that they've been, what's the phrase? They've been overcome by the emotional moment, let's say, or they're angry, or they're upset, or depressed, or tired, or they've got the wrong end of the stick, because lots of then biases kick in, like confirmation bias. You got to really nip that one in the bud, because that's just going to keep on building a negative impact in the wrong direction. So even though it's a skill in itself, being able to manage your impact, I like the idea of being able to turn it on and off, because it fits people's nature. And you know what we do? We don't do personality transplants. It takes a long time, a lifetime. And quite often when we're working, we've only got a couple of days with people at most. So we are looking for those small wins, and getting people to see why it's important is a really good thing. Why are you doing this? Why are you going to make this small change? Because I was working with this guy and we were talking about, because when it comes to personal impact, we can all have real blind sides.
Mm.
We don't see often how
Yeah.
we're coming across. And I remember one time a guy in training, he said, that's what I've come here for, to have people, only your best friends tell you what you're really doing, how you're really coming across. And I thought that's really good, because often people won't say, they'll just adapt to you. They'll say, oh, that's just him.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, so there's a discrepancy to how you think you're coming across and how you're actually coming across. And it's all about matching that too. And I think being able to turn it on and off when it's important is really helpful, because it, you know, some people just don't want to spend all that time thinking about how they're coming across, because quite often that's how narcissists exist. They're always thinking about what my impact is on people, how am I coming across. It's generally a vain one they're aiming for. But on the whole, it's tiring as well. So it's context based, and I think being able, if you can dial it on and off according to the context, I think that's way handier.
Okay.
But that in itself, I think, is an extra skill of.
So one of the things that I picked up on what you said there is, so it seems that in order to be able to genuinely gauge your own impact, if this is about personal, starting with self-awareness, then the ability to ask a trusted friend, colleague for honest, open feedback, and then to be able to take that as a learning opportunity, I guess is sort of the foundation of this building your self-awareness. It's hard to be self-aware of your impact on others from inside.
It is, absolutely. It can be done. It can be done.
Okay.
But it's what is the model you use? Because if you start to use the model, I can see my thinking, that's generally a warning sign that you can't. Because it's called the subconscious for a reason.
Yeah.
What we can do is we can see certain patterns that come up, like astronomers see, you know, an astronomer will discover Neptune because of some strange dip in the motion of Saturn. So they don't actually see Neptune, but they see its impact on something else. And when you see, they can see that how many planets a distant star has, because the light dips in a regular frequency, so they can see this has got 6 planets around it.
Right.
And that's the kind of thing how you see it, because if you go to a coffee shop, over the space of like 2 years, you go to like, say, 20 different coffee shops, and in 6 or 7 of them, people don't bring you forget your order, then I'm starting to think that it's not the coffee shop that's happening, something's happening with, it's you. What are you doing to bring about people ignoring your order or giving you poor service? It's possibly something you're doing. Clearly not by intent.
Yeah.
But it's purely by accident. Maybe you always associate coffee shops with a place for you to just forget about life for a while. So you go in there and you forget to say please, you forget to give eye contact. You're a little bit accidentally interpreted as rude because you're so tired. You just want to be on your own for a bit. But the byproduct is the impact it's a rude customer.
Sure.
Especially when you look like me, you look like you played rugby, which I've never I've played rugby. You sort of like blokey. Then that adds to it, to the old kind of thing.
Yeah, it's definitely it's also about knowing just how you fill space, isn't it? So you say, you know, you've got an appearance of someone who's a rugby player. I remember quite some time ago, I was in a short film called Tortoise, and it was all about this short guy, me, and who had a tall friend, and how he had a lack of confidence with girls because he was short. And I met the director at Waterloo Station. She was late. I was waiting around for her. And when she arrived, we'd never met before, but she was really little. And we just gave each other a hug. And she said, "You wouldn't have done that if I wasn't little." I thought, oh, that's interesting. So there's so many things about the way that we come across that we have some control over, and others that we don't, but that we can be aware of. So we've done work
yeah.
with a Dutch bank, as you know,
Yeah.
and Dutch people in general have two things that are quite well known about them. One of them is they are considered to be the tallest nation on earth.
Which they are.
And the second one is that the way that they use English is deemed to be very direct.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were working with these executives, these banking executives, they were saying that they were finding it quite difficult to build warm relationships. So they could have very business-like relationships, but they didn't feel that they were connecting with people on a human level.
Right.
And we identified these two things. Said, well, you know, there's a good chance that you might seem to be a little bit intimidating because of your height and because of the direct way that you use language. And so just a bit of insight like that gives them the opportunity to do things small, easy to do things like, okay, well, when we meet, I'll try and make sure that I sit down very quickly and don't loom.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I'll ask more questions rather than giving too many answers initially and turn it into more of a consultation. And it was a great revelation for them. It also meant that it wasn't them being disingenuous. They weren't trying to achieve something that wasn't in their nature.
I think that's what I think I said it earlier. Yeah, that people who do personal impact work can often feel you're training me to be disingenuous, and that is not what we want to happen. It's very important. You still have to be you.
Yeah,
you still have to be. This reminds me of the height thing. It was an English guy.
Yeah,
it was really tall, and you know he had this wonderful, wonderful, soft voice, which we just wanted to listen to.
Yeah,
I mean, you know, during the training, he said, "Oh, you got a really great voice." And he says, yeah, I developed it. And you thought, what? Developed it. He said, yeah, I found people were intimidated by my height. So I had to develop a nice voice. And that essentially is a fantastic example. I've got some other examples. But that is such a fantastic example of understanding that by no fault of your own, that the impact you're having is a negative one. And you have to do something to mitigate it. And his was quite, I mean, from our point of view, it was quite a big one. We generally wouldn't advise such a major change. But he obviously,
that's a big investment, isn't it?
Yeah, big investment.
In time.
Yeah. But obviously he felt it was so important that it actually worked.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned earlier was, so when you said your kids identify that you've got your trainer voice on and you're doing this, you're doing that. One of the things that you mentioned was listening. And I think that is something that people can learn to do better. That rather than having to change your voice, which is a long-term commitment, takes a lot of effort, but just turning up the level of listening to others without that sort of instinct to want to help or want to provide a solution, but just giving someone your focus.
I got a good sound bite for you. It's from the former. It's not often I'm ever going to quote a French president, but this one's from Jacques Chirac. He famously said,
I thought he was the scuba diver, but that's Jacques Cousteau.
Jacques Cousteau.
Yeah.
He famously said at one big meeting he had afterwards, what would you think? He said, I missed a really good opportunity to shut up. And I thought that's a good way of looking at it, because it's a good thing to not speak.
Yeah.
Listen, because people feel, if you can make people feel listened to, that's changing the impact already. And all it is not doing something rather than doing something. And it's also can feed into your other values. It's polite, it's respectful, it's interesting. You get to learn about people more. There's so many positive things come from good listening that it's really not something artificial you're doing. It's something positive and human you're doing.
Definitely. I think one of the other sort of, if you like, the wonderful combination of good listening, if you can also look for opportunities to compliment the other person on what they're saying, what they're doing, what their viewpoint, or that's an interesting perspective, or I haven't heard that one before. I haven't heard that one about Jack. I want to say Kerouac now. What was he?
Chirac.
Jacques Chirac. But that listening to people and then actually giving them that sense of value, I think. And again, not being disingenuous about it, looking for opportunities. We talk a lot when we're working with people in conflict management situations. We talk a lot about identifying that very often the listening position becomes listen in order to wait for your opportunity to respond. But what tends to derail conflict is listening for your opportunity to agree. And that doesn't mean that you have to give your side away, but to think, what is there going on in this conversation? Where are the opportunities for us to actually identify where we overlap? What are the bits that we agree on? Even if it's purely agreeing that this is a serious issue or this needs to be resolved. Let's agree with that, but then don't take the counter position. You're absolutely right. This is something that needs to be dealt with, and we all need to feel that we've been heard.
I do like the idea of the compliment. It's something that I started to do a lot.
Yeah.
Because it is an easily doable thing, and it's a nice thing to say. It's a really good thing to say. A little bit careful about giving women compliments, because sometimes it can be misconstrued as some kind of a flirt or something else. But other than that, it's simple, easy, nice, makes the world a better place, letting people know what is a positive thing. And it's something I do a lot. Right. I do a lot.
Just thinking about this this idea of personal impact and translating it into the future. Thinking about, so we can have this sort of those more definite strategies, such as turning up the listening, looking for agreement or for a compliment, looking for the opportunity to shut up. There's also this idea of how over time do we build a reputation? How does personal impact affect the way that we build a reputation at work, for instance?
I guess it is drip by drip by drip. It's the repetition, the habits, the patterns. Sometimes there are bigger opportunities to build a reputation. Let's say if you're at work and somebody says, can you give this talk on this new business idea? That's your opportunity to control your branding, control your impact up to a branding level. And so sometimes the opportunities to do that are really important, and we shouldn't pass them up. We should make more of an effort, because quite often people, because I was thinking about what are the elements that make up personal impact, and quite often assumptions can be one of them. Quite often what you're doing is mitigating other people's negative assumptions. And so you have to sort of it's yet again, it's that awareness. How could I be coming across? Is it all right? Can I just leave it? You know, I'm seen as the tech person at Impact Factory, but I'm not that techie. I'm not that techie.
I see you that way. I'm in the room with you. I'm like, oh, thank goodness for that.
It's very much a case in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. But it's not something I'm going to say. I'm not techie. I'm just going to leave it. Just leave it. But sometimes people can. I mean, you can look back and people can say, "Oh, you were a little bit blunt." And I thought, all right, that might be a case where I have to look at different ways of explaining it, what I have to say to different personalities. Because some people just want clarity. And often, because people can talk around things so much, they see clarity as bluntness. They're misinterpreting clarity as bluntness. So you have to remember that as well. So quite often, it's not just about managing issues you have, it's managing cultural issues, and it's managing people's assumptions. Which and even though you might think it's not fair, it's life. Life is not fair.
Yeah. Well.
So you have to. It's basically a sort of phrase I have that goes along the lines of things should not only be right, but look right. Because it's all right, you doing everything right, it's the right thing, but the perception, perception is reality. Perception is very different. You can't blame life. Life doesn't care. If you're a blamer person, you got to blame yourself and do something about it. Accept it, or accept and do something about it. Because, for example, I've got a couple of examples from the same company as well in Nottingham. There was it was a big floor full of managers in this sort of delivery company. So it's very traditional male dominated, a few women there. And there's this one woman there, she said, I think because I'm quiet, I'm overlooked. Now, she wasn't even playing that it's because I'm a woman card. It's because I'm quiet. And I thought, okay. But then after chatting with her, it turns out she was, she had a black belt in karate. And I thought, okay, why don't you just get a picture of yourself in your black belt, in your outfit, put it on your desk. People will wander by, would give you work, talk to people, all business, they see it. So, is that you, a black belt? Okay. After 3 months, your branding has changed. So, oh yeah, you may be verbally quiet, but she's capable of looking after herself. And all of a sudden you've mitigated that sort of unspoken sense of weakness which comes with quietness.
Okay.
And I've got another example, not on the very next desk, that would be too perfect, but only about 3 or 4 desks away, was this big bearded northern guy. Now you might think he's not going to get promoted anytime soon. He might be a bit old school. So that's the assumption going on, because he's a northerner and he's got a beard and he can be a bit direct, and perhaps that's not the future of management they're looking for. So he's got his own problems he's dealing with, completely at the other end of the spectrum. But it turns out he's a painter, and he actually had one of his paintings exhibited in the Tate Modern.
Wow.
And I thought, well, all you need to do, get a copy of your painting, stick it on the wall behind you. It becomes a talking point. Oh, you paint? Then you're sensitive, sophisticated, adaptable. And all of a sudden, he's now got the qualities for promotion. He's mitigated the negative assumption. And quite often it is all about that.
And it's interesting, when you said put the painting on the wall behind him, was that in the office?
In the office,
is that
yeah.
remote?
Just you get a print of it. I wouldn't actually bring the real one, because it actually might be worth a bit of money. You just get a print of it, put it there. Some other one, say, I did that. Yeah, it was in the Tate. All of a sudden, you know, because I like those, because you're not actually doing much. It's someone else's problem, but you have to take responsibility for it. But you're not actually doing much. You're just putting up a photo or putting up a print.
Yeah. No, that's actually, I just wanted to, so you've just used the word responsibility, and I think that's key. I'm not so keen on the word blame yourself, or the blame lies with you. The responsibility.
Well, some people
lies
are blamers. That's the thing.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get my son not to be a blamer.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's just consequences. It's just the way it is. No one's to blame. It's the system that we're working in.
Yeah. So when we train with people, and we're looking for sort of behavioral changes, we often say to them that if you look back on an opportunity to do the thing, whatever that thing was, and you realize that you missed the opportunity, congratulate yourself on noticing it, even if it's after the event. So a blaming might make it a bit more, oh, I'm down on myself, that was silly, I missed the chance, as opposed to, oh, well done me, I'm getting good at becoming more aware. Because then what happens is the gap between the thing happening, or the opportunity, and the self-awareness gets smaller and smaller until you become aware in the moment, and then you can do the thing. So for me, certainly, I think the way that I expand my personal impact, or sort of develop my personal impact, is through not being too hard on myself, being quite kind to myself.
It would be nice if we could do that, but people's natures can often be pushed in one direction, and we have to get them away from there. But that tip about congratulating yourself, it's not just for self-awareness. I think it's for everything.
Yeah,
I think it's something we forget to do. Well done, well done. Especially, well, we're talking about personal impact, but a presentation is often a formalized time when you can control the personal impact you have, and people will often don't like presenting. So I do say to people, the 2 things you do, 2 rules. If you pick up 2 things and do 2 things differently, one is you have to finish. And the other one is congratulate yourself, no matter what, even if it's just for completing it. And so I think congratulating yourself it's a tool we could write a book about, how to reward yourself. Because what you're doing is you're creating something called positive feedback. Now, positive feedback can go in a negative direction, as well as something a better direction, but it's creating that snowball effect. And the more you congratulate yourself, the more you give yourself positive self-talk, just the more confident and happier you are.
Sure.
But it's a mental health tool as well.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I love to hear, if we're working with people maybe on an open course, but certainly so any of the delegates at Impact Factory, when someone says, what I'm going to do from now on is I'm going to volunteer to do this more often. when we start making it a habit of stepping slightly outside of our comfort zone and actually doing that proactively, maybe not being bounced into having to give a presentation, that will sit slightly differently with us than volunteering. And I think that has a lot of impact on our personal impact. Thinking I'm the person who is reaching out to develop myself. I'm happy to take a little bit of a risk. I want to become something, i.e. I'm constantly developing. And I think one of the ways in order to help people think of you as someone who is developing is reaching out for opportunities to do things that are slightly different. And I remember when one of the things that Joel and one of our founders said in a meeting once was, they were talking about someone who had been made up to being a partner. And they said, the thing is, they've been behaving like a partner for quite some time. And so it's a no-brainer then to move them into that level of being a partner. And I think it's important that if we realize that if we are to be promoted, whoever's doing the promotion for us is taking a bit of a gambling that we can take that step up. But if we can reduce their sense of risk by behaving in the way of that higher level the next rung up the ladder, then it makes it easier for them to take that risk on us. And so just thinking in terms of developing your career is to have a sense of behaving in the way of the people on that one rung above you.
I also think small changes, because what you're talking about is it's obstacles we encounter every day in our training, is getting people to do something different, change. Obstacle to change. So even if we can just get people to say, if it's, let's say we look at the context someone's in and someone would just, they feel they say yes too quickly or yes too much, then the goal is the smaller the change, the better. And it's, can you, before you say yes, spell pause in your head? So you're adding just a slight delay. Will that make a difference? And of course, we know it does, makes a massive difference. It makes the person asking you stop and think. And so if they can have a success doing that, then they can have a success doing something slightly else. They can make the pause longer. They can stand up as well before they say yes. And then ultimately, they can start asking questions back before they say yes. How long do you need to get it by? How important is it? Stuff, examples like that. So it's really important. It's a small thing. Really, because I've actually encountered training where people go in a training course and they either do one or two things. Not our training, by the way, other training courses. They come back and all they talk about is the trainer. That's it. Nothing else. No content, just how amazing they were. Or they come back and they think, oh, well, yeah, it's this 10-step process. It's not me. I don't think I can do it. They've done training and ended up feeling worse than they did before because the ambition of the training was way too high and unreasonable. So personal impact especially look for small things, tiny things that you can use in many different contexts, but also looking for what is the context you want to change in? What is the problem for you?
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I think so I'm currently teaching my daughter to drive. And when you look at all of the different steps in driving, there isn't one step that's difficult. But putting it all together, when you are first in the driving seat, it seems really intimidating because there's such a lot to think about. So instead, taking that step of, okay, all we're going to do is you're just going to turn the engine on, and you turn it off again. You turn the engine on, turn it off again. Get used to that. It did, the first time I did it, it did make the battery go flat. So I would do that for a little bit less time. But then the next thing is, okay, now put it into first gear. Let's move forwards and then let's stop again. And just those tiny little increments so that we can start making some of them bankers. Okay, now you can switch on the car, get into first gear and pull forward without really thinking about it. So now she's got some space for the other stuff.
Yeah. Did you do the one about making yourself comfortable in the seat, moving it forward and backwards, knowing how to move the seat so you're comfortable and at the right space from the steering wheel?
Well, she got in and she shoved it right up. So as often you find with new drivers, they tend to sit really, really over the wheel. But I think that's a good analogy for the sort of stuff that we're talking about as well. That sense of, in order to feel that you can achieve more control, you might grab that little bit tighter if you're doing something new. And what that means is you need to do something like we did, find a car park, an empty car park, as opposed to being on a motorway. So when we were talking to people about changing their behavior, little small steps, but also we say, find a low impact encounter to do it first. Yeah. So you don't feel too terrified doing it, or the consequences of it going wrong aren't too big.
Yeah, there was a banking company I worked with when they onboarded new people, they developed this system. They wouldn't tell me too much about it. It was obviously quite clever. It's where they could put them in and get them training up, where the consequences of them screwing up were minimal. But they were learning so much in the real trading zone, but they weren't going to cause serious problems for the company. So the learning curve was massive. So it is, if you can reduce the consequences. But I think when it comes to change and personal impact, if you can just grease the essential mechanisms of adaptability, constantly doing. For example, when I take the kids to Wagamama, I do like the yaki udon with the noodles, and I just found myself ordering it every time. So just for the sake of breaking a habit, I always go and order something else. I'll order something else. Whenever I see a habit, I'll break it deliberately, just to make building new habits that when I need to, that much easier. And I think that's what we're talking about, because why does it matter, personal impact, ultimately? Why does it matter?
Yeah, I think it matters because if you are going to spend any time for the rest of your life with other people, then you are going to be having an impact on them, and you want to make sure that impact is as close as possible to your intention. So I want people to think this way about me, or I want them to take away this message, or I want them to be motivated, or I want them to collaborate, or I want them to feel safe and supported and heard. All of those things are grown by your personal impact. So you can have a sense of an impact such as when perhaps you're starting out your career. This is someone who is willing to try new things, who listens well, who can take on board direction. And then as you progress, it might be this is someone who's a great team player, who's able to support others. And then you get to become sort of a manager or a regional manager or a director or something like that. And then it becomes, this is someone who can inspire. This is someone who can strategize. And all of these things come from developing your personal impact. Now, no one's going to expect that new starter to be able to behave in the way of that developed global leader, but they've got there through a process of improving their personal impact and trying things out for size, trying new things, and then thinking this suits me, that one doesn't, but I become more agile, I become more skilled.
It's also, we say you can't change other people. You can only change yourself and get a different response from people. And you get that different response by changing your impact. And there's a story, I think it's from the book Thinking Fast and Slow, or it could be from the Emotional Intelligence book, where this one guy gets a job working with another engineer. So he's an engineer working with another engineer fixing big trucks. And he's been warned, this guy is a miserable so-and-so. So he starts working with this guy, and the guy is a miserable so-and-so. And after 6 months, you think, I can't do this anymore. I can't have this life working with this guy. So what I'm going to do every day, I'm just going to be positive about him, say positive things, think positive things, and make sure that I have a good day and be positive about him. Completely change the relationship with the other guy. Completely change what his response to the new guy. And even when the new guy got sick and had to spend time off in hospital, the old miserable guy covered for him, didn't complain, even came to visit him in the hospital. That's personal impact. You can change your life by changing a few little things about yourself to get a different response from other people. We can't live a life without interacting with humans. And that's what personal impact's all about.
on that note, great talking to you, Tom.
Great talking to
I
you,
think
Bill.
that was interesting conversation. Thanks for that. I learned quite a bit.
So did I. Thank you.
All right. Cheers.